Hey everyone, do you enjoy weird Bible stories? Well, I've got some good ones for you today. We're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 19, and there are some awkward situations going on. There are people out there that say the Bible is a book that is for children and written for children. It's just not. There's some stuff in there that's not appropriate. There's some stuff that's happening that is really adult content, and we're going to be talking about two stories that kind of fall into that category today. So hold on to your hats because this is going to be a good one. Now, before we get into the study itself, please do me a huge favor. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking into the void and I don't get any feedback whatsoever. So today, while you're listening to this, if you could just think of one thing that you learned or found interesting or one takeaway from this video and just let me know in the comments below what that is, that'd really go a long way to encourage me. It is hard to do this from an emotional standpoint. I know it might not seem that way because I'm always smiling behind the camera, but it really is. It's a struggle some days to know if I'm even having an impact with people. So if you could do me that huge favor, I'd greatly appreciate it. Now remember, we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 19 today. So take the time to read it because I'm not going to read it to you, and I want to make sure you have that chapter in its full context. So pause the video now and read it now, or wait to the end of the video and read it when I'm done, so that way you have a full picture of what I'm talking about. But we're going to go through it based on some of the things that I think are interesting. So this chapter 19, this chapter of Genesis, starts with the angels who had talked to Abraham going down to the city of Sodom to fulfill their prophecy to him, and they're going to destroy it, right? And so they show up, and it's interesting because Lot knows the dangers of the city that he's in, right? We can see this because he immediately goes to them and says, hey, please don't stay in the square. Come and stay with me. You want to know why? Because Lot knows that the city that he lives in is unsafe. Yet it's interesting because he still chose to stay there. And I think as Christians we do this often. There are things in our life that aren't godly. There are things in our life that we might not actively pursue, but we're around and we don't speak out against them, or we allow them to continue to be in our lives because that's just the way of the world. But it's affecting us in ways that we might not even realize. And we'll see this as we look at this chapter in Lot's life. But so Lot knows he's in a place that he shouldn't be. He knows he's in a dangerous city, and we can see it right out of the gate because he's telling these angels, please come stay with me. Do not stay in the square. The other thing we can learn from Lot here is he's incredibly hospitable. Now, this is typically a Middle Eastern cultural thing to be very hospitable. And in America, I don't know where you're watching this from, but in America, where I live, we're not very hospitable to people that we don't know. And I think we could learn a lot as Christians about that specific act. I think that we should be hospitable. We should be, being that light, being that thing that is different in the world to those around us, even to those that we don't know. It's very easy to be hospitable to our family and our friends and our loved ones. It's much harder to take that leap of faith and be hospitable to maybe people that you don't know. And that can go a long way to help your own personal testimony with those people and the people that you see or that see you treating others with respect, dignity, and hospitality. Now, we can see Sodom's depravity in this situation because the men of the city know that two new travelers came in, and angels are probably beautiful, right? They're probably attractive people. They're not disgusting in any sense of the word. So these men see these angels who they're perceiving as men, and they essentially want to sleep with them. And they're begging, or not begging, they're demanding that Lot allows that to happen. Now, I did another video a long time ago on homosexuality. I'm not going to touch on that today because that's not the point of this Bible study, but if you want my thoughts on that topic, I'm pretty sensitive about it because I understand the struggle. I understand what people go through and that sort of thing. So if you want to watch my thoughts, I have a whole other video about that. So if you want to see a Christian response or perspective on homosexuality, check that out. I'll put a link in the description below. I'll also put a card up here somewhere. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you check that out because I'm not going to touch too much on it today. But so what we see is that Lot's not really a good person, right? Because his response is, hey, I have two daughters who've never slept with a man. Please have them instead, right? He refuses their desire, but he tries to give them a substitute and he's offering up his own daughters. And as a parent myself, I couldn't imagine doing that, and I'm not sure what's going through his mind. And he does have the understanding that, hey, he needs to protect these people because he brought them under his care, under his roof. But still, it takes a different type of person to say, hey, instead of having the guests that are in my house, have my daughters. Like, and maybe this is my Americanism coming out, but I don't understand that. And so all I can say is in this situation, that's not the appropriate response. And there's something that we see here that's really relevant that I want to talk about. It's that there are things that are recorded in the Bible that are being recorded because they're true events and they're real life dealing with real people who are really wretched. And oftentimes people will use these things and say, well, God condones X because it's in the Bible. One of the biggest examples is polygamy. Some of the major biblical fathers in the Old Testament are polygamists. They are married to lots of women, or at least two. And so people will point to that and say, well, God condones polygamy. And that's not the case. Just because it's recorded in the Bible doesn't mean God condones it. And so this situation is recorded in the Bible, and we're going to see another one here at the end of chapter 19 that's recorded in the Bible. And that doesn't mean that God condones it. It's just being recorded because guess what? It's real life. It's dealing with real people who are really, really wretched, just like you and me. So just because something is recorded in the Bible doesn't mean that God condones it. And so I want to be very clear on that because we're going to see that again and again. Now it's interesting because in this scenario, Lot only escapes the situation with the angel's intervention. They blind everybody, they shut the door, and Lot's able to escape. But see, here we go again, this idea that Lot knew these people were evil, and he didn't really have a plan to get out. He shouldn't have been living in that city. He really shouldn't have been in that situation. And that situation made him make other bad choices, like trying to give up his daughters. So Christian, what situation are you putting yourself in that God doesn't want you in, that is causing other issues in your life? Figure that out and remove it from your life because it's doing more damage than you probably realize. Lot didn't expect these people to come into his life, right? These two visitors, but he took them under his care, and now that caused a problem because of the environment that he subjected himself to. We all subject ourselves to our environments, so be mindful of what you are putting yourself in because it can cause damage now and in the future where you might not even expect it. Now, I know people, when I say that, they'll say something like, well, Jesus sat with sinners and Jesus ate with sinners, so I'm in my environment because I'm trying to reach the lost. And I understand that to an extent. But if you're going to a bar every Friday because you're trying to reach the lost, it's probably having more of an impact of you aligning with them than them aligning with you. And remember, when Jesus ate with sinners, when he left, they were reformed. They were no longer sinful. They realized their wretchedness. They repented and became Christians. And those who refused to do that, something like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, where Jesus calls them out for their sins time and time again, and they refuse to repent, he doesn't eat with those people. He doesn't continue to spend lots of time with those people. He will interact with them when they come across his path, and that is his mission field, but he's not subjecting himself to that as an environment day in and day out from a meal perspective or, hey, these are my friends perspective, right? The sinners that Jesus hung out with, the sinners that Jesus ate with, were reformed through the interactions with Jesus. So don't use Jesus as your excuse for why you still hang out with people who are doing sinful things and continue to do sinful things, because that's having a negative impact on your life. I don't know if you ever heard of this theory, but you're actually influenced by the 5 people that are closest to you. So whoever you spend the most time with, those 5 people, you're actually being brought up or brought down by them. So if you are a Christian and your inner circle of friends are non-Christians, you are more likely to act like them than they are to act like you. Now, if you are surrounding yourself with Christian friends, you're being pulled in the Christian direction. So just make sure you understand who your friends are, what their beliefs are, and evaluate why you're spending time with them, because they can pull you in a direction you might not want to be going. Excuse me, I just, love the coffee. Not sponsored by any coffee company. I'm too small for that, but it's good. If you're like me and you're a coffee addict, I drink mine black. I like coffee. I don't like creamer. That was a complete random tangent. Sorry for that. All right, so where were we? All right, so interesting to note, the angels tell Lot, hey, we are going to destroy this city. Do you have family members here? Do you have sons-in-laws, daughters, anyone to tell? Tell them, because we're going to destroy this city. And I told you that Lot has already ruined his testimony by living in this city, and he's probably not living what we would consider a Christian life. Now, again, Jesus didn't come, so he's not Christian, but he wasn't living a righteous life, right? And we can see how this directly impacts his testimony. He goes to his sons-in-law, the people that were betrothed to his two daughters, and they laugh at him. They ignore him because his testimony was already ruined based on his life's actions. Lot probably acted like everyone else. So when he comes with a message from God, essentially, they're not going to take him seriously. They just essentially ignore him. And so your testimony can be affected negatively by how you act day in and day out. So I tell people all the time, you are forgiven of your sins if you're a Christian. But that's not a get out of jail free card. That doesn't mean you can just live your life however you want to. And if you do, it's destroying your testimony. It's destroying your impact to the world, and you are a very ineffective Christian. That's right where Satan wants you to be. You need to be different so that when people even see you without talking to you, they know that you're different. And they ask, why is DJ different? Why does he not do the things that we do? And when they have issues or concerns that come up in their lives, they're going to reach out to you because there's a hole in everyone's life that can only be filled by God. And in moments of grief, in moments of despair, in moments of frustration, those people will remember your testimony, and they may reach out to you because they'll be searching for an answer. Don't let your testimony be ruined by how you act during the day. All right. Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked today. Where are we at? So, again, I told you Lot's not a good person. Even the angels have to essentially force him to leave. The Lord shows Lot mercy. Lot didn't leave because he wanted to. Lot left because God showed him mercy. Let's look at verse 16 together. It says, "But he lingered," referring to Lot, "so the men seized him and his wife and his two daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and left him outside the city." So Lot, really not a good person. He was in love with his sin, and he wanted to stay there. Knowing full well that the city would be destroyed, he still lingered because he was in love with his sin. So friends, whatever you have in your life that is sinful, that you are attaching yourself to, please give it up to God. Get rid of it because it can take your life, right? So just like Lot, he's tied to his sin, and if he would have lingered too long, it would have ruined him. So we need to be aware of the things that we are prone to in our life, and we need to remove them from our lives. Now, interestingly enough, he gets dragged out of the city, and what's Lot do? Lot immediately looks for the next city to go to. Why? Because he's in love with his sin. Now, the Lord relents and allows him, these angels relent and allow him to, go to another city, and they promise not to destroy it. But Lot also knows that city's probably not that good. So he's like the person who's a drug addict who replaces their hard drug addiction with a softer drug addiction. You go from, I've never done hard drugs, so I'm probably making a bad analogy here, but you go from cocaine to marijuana to cigarettes, and yeah, you're progressing downward, but the thing you're going to is still bad. Or someone who, is an alcoholic with liquor, then just gets rid of liquor and drinks more beer. You're still doing something that's destructive. And so this is what Lot did. Lot was in a city that was destructive, and now that he's forced out of it, he wants to go to immediately another city that will also be destructive because, again, he's in love with his sin. And you see how this progresses. It constantly ruins your testimony. Don't be like Lot. That's really what I can tell you. And it's interesting because Jesus even uses Lot as a warning in Luke 17:32. So Lot is a good example for us as Christians as a way in which we shouldn't live our life, right? Because he's constantly making bad decisions based on his love for his sins. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that Lot's wife looks back, and often you see this as the image of them fleeing the city, and she just glances back and then gets turned into a pillar of salt. But that's not how it happens. If you read the passage, you'll notice that they're already at the new city. So Lot's wife is not just looking back at Sodom, she's longing for Sodom. Her heart's still in Sodom. She was way worse than Lot. She was so in love with her sin that her wretchedness made her desire Sodom. And that's why, she was turned into a pillar of salt. It wasn't because she just happened to glance backwards, but it was because she actually longed for Sodom. Her heart was invested in her sin, and she longed for her sin, which is why she's turned into the pillar of salt. All right, now we're going to get to the next weird story. I need a hot coffee break. Hold on. All right, so we got through Sodom and Gomorrah getting destroyed. It does get destroyed, of course, and Abraham sees the prophecies fulfilled. Then we hear this other weird story. So Lot is at the city of Zoar, and he realizes it's not safe either. So he finally makes a wiser decision and goes and lives in the hill country, because Zoar is just as bad as Sodom and Gomorrah, probably, is what we're gathering. He doesn't feel safe there, so he does finally make a wise decision and leave. But his daughters, who are now city dwellers, because of Lot's testimony, because of his life, they are city-dwelling people. They don't want to be in the hill country, and they're concerned now about their well-being. How are we going to meet a man, right? They're worried about worldly things and not godly things, and Lot didn't teach them, didn't train them up in the ways of the Lord, so they are concerned about worldly things. Their descendants, right? So they get Lot incredibly drunk on 2 separate occasions, and his children sleep with him. Again, this is another perfect example. Something recorded in the Bible that God is not condoning. It's actually, God's explicitly against it in Leviticus. He talks about how you can't sleep with your daughters. But it's recorded here because this is a real person with real events that are being recorded for us. So this did happen, but God doesn't condone it. But remember, this is happening because of Lot's life, his lifestyle, his testimony. He's someone who was prone, obviously, to drunkenness. Having a drink, not necessarily sinful. Being a drunk, being addicted to drinking, is a sin. And the reason for that is because we can see the damage it causes. He's now not able to make wise decisions. He sleeps with his own daughter. Again, as a parent, I don't know why that word was so hard for me. As a parent, I can't imagine getting that drunk that I want to sleep with my child. Like, it doesn't make sense in my brain. So Lot was obviously depraved and affected by his sinful lifestyle, and so were his children. Because again, they're worried about worldly things. They're worried about their descendants. They're worried about, their own worldly life instead of the things of God. And so because of that, we have 2 nations come from this. We have the Moabites and the Amorites and the mosquito bites and all the other ites, right? So just the Moabites and the Amorites. And it's interesting because later in Numbers, we see the Moabite women are the ones who entice the men of Israel to sleep with them and dishonor God and causes issues. That's in the book of Numbers. And the Amorites are the ones who convince Israel to worship Molech. Right? So because of Lot's life, because of his lifestyle, because of his testimony, it affected his daughters, who then made bad decisions, which then had an impact through history. Right? Your life matters. Your life is a gift from God, and your choices matter, and they will have a ripple effect throughout the rest of the time on earth. Whether you believe it or not, everybody you interact with is having a ripple effect on their life. Whether it's your children, your friends, your family, you're impacting them. You have a sphere of influence that is impacting those around you and is having consequences, good or bad, throughout history. So, to close, what does your testimony do? What impact are you having? Look at Lot's life for an example. He lost his wife. He lost his sons-in-law. He lost probably his friends that were in Sodom. He lost his property, and he almost lost his life because he lingered. And then he did damage throughout history to Israel because of his bad decisions with his daughters and his proneness to the drink. don't be like Lot. If Lot would have been a righteous man like Abraham, there would have been a different outcome with all of these events. Lot put himself in an environment that he shouldn't have been in. Lot didn't live a religious life, so he had no impact in a positive way on his family, on his sons-in-law, on his daughters, on his spouse. And he barely escaped with his life. Don't be like Lot. Listen to Jesus' warning in the Gospel of Luke. Christian friends, just because you have your salvation, just because you've been forgiven, doesn't exempt you from living a godly life. Peter reminds us, be holy because the Lord is holy. That alone will impact the world. I know there's so many people I talk to that say, I don't have the ability to speak to people I don't know, or even people I know about Christianity. That's just not the way I work. That's okay. That's okay, because your testimony, the way you live your life, will reflect God to those people. And eventually, maybe down the line, they will ask you questions. But if you're not living a righteous and godly life, if you are not striving to live the way that Jesus wants you to live, you are going to have a negative impact on the people around you. And you're missing opportunities every single day to bring someone to the Lord. If you're acting like the world, what's the point? Why should we be a Christian, right? Why should anyone be a Christian if we all act like anyone who's a non-Christian? So if you are acting like the world, you're being like Lot. And the negative impacts will be revealed throughout your life. So repent of that if that's speaking to you today, and live the way Jesus wants you to live, so you may have a lasting testimony for the good that has a ripple effect through all of history. All glory to God, friends. I hope you're well today. Please continue to encourage those around you because the world desperately, desperately needs it. Go be the salt of the earth, be the light to the world, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.